It happened in silence. No cameras, no press, no grand announcement. Just after midnight, deep inside Windsor Castle, Princess Anne placed a small golden circlet upon Catherine's head and whispered the words, "By honor, by grace, by service." That single act, unseen by the world, would change royal history forever. While Britain slept, the crown was symbolically passed. Not by law, but by faith. And as dawn broke, Queen Camilla had vanished without a trace. What really happened behind those chapel doors? And why did the palace fight so hard to keep it secret? The night Britain held its breath. On the evening of October 2nd, 2025, the entire United Kingdom seemed to pause. News bulletins confirmed that King Charles III's condition had taken a sudden decline, and for the first time in months, Buckingham Palace sounded unsure. Streets that had been filled with tourists by day turned eerily quiet by 8 p.m., as families gathered around televisions waiting for updates. In the palace itself, a quiet storm was building, one of uncertainty, tension, and unspoken urgency. Inside the Royal Communications Office, senior aides worked under red-level alert. Sir Clive Alderton, the King's principal private secretary, began receiving encrypted calls from both Sandringham and Windsor. What began as a health crisis had turned into a constitutional one. The question whispered among advisers was no longer, "Will the king recover?" but "Who holds the crown if he cannot?" By 10:30 p.m., the first emergency summons went out to key royals, among them Princess Anne, Prince William, and Queen Camilla. But not all three received the same message. As the public focused on the king's failing health, a far more delicate operation unfolded in the background. Buckingham's inner circle began preparing sealed envelopes labeled Continuity Directive 7, a rarely used protocol created after Queen Elizabeth II's passing in 2022. Its purpose was to safeguard the Crown's chain of command in the event of incapacitation. One source later described that night as the closest Britain has come to a silent succession. The monarchy was standing on a knife's edge, and few knew which way it would fall. By 11:15 p.m., Princess Anne was seen leaving Sandringham under full security escort. Locals reported the sight of a convoy of 3 dark vehicles heading south through Norfolk's rural roads, headlights dimmed. No statement was issued, but intelligence shared between palace staff confirmed her route. She was bound for Windsor Castle, and her arrival time was expected just after midnight. That single movement would soon become the most talked-about journey of Anne's life. As Princess Anne's motorcade disappeared into the mist, the palace itself fell into uneasy silence. The Queen Consort had yet to appear. The press grew restless, and aides spoke only in hushed tones. Britain waited, unaware that before dawn, one of the most secret royal rituals of modern times would take place. A kingdom thought it was watching a health crisis, but in truth, history was already moving toward a hidden coronation. The vanishing of Queen Camilla. At almost the same hour Princess Anne's convoy reached Windsor's south gate, reporters noticed something else. Queen Camilla was nowhere to be seen. Her car, normally stationed at Clarence House, hadn't moved since 5 p.m. No public appearances, no statements, not even a photograph. The Daily Telegraph sent correspondents to trace her schedule. Nothing. For a woman known for her visibility, the absence spoke volumes. Inside the palace, whispers began to grow. Where was the Queen Consort? Sources close to the royal household later claimed Camilla had withdrawn for private reflection. But off record, aides told another story, one of anger, confrontation, and control. That same afternoon, Camilla had reportedly demanded access to King Charles's private documents, including drafts of his constitutional directives and letters addressed to the Privy Council. Her request was denied by Sir Edward Young, citing legal constraints. Witnesses said the Queen Consort's response was explosive. For hours after, she remained unreachable, her personal phone switched off, her staff dismissed from duty before 9 p.m. As the King's health team continued their work at the London clinic, courtiers grew uneasy. Without Camilla present, the traditional hierarchy of royal coordination had broken down. In her absence, decisions fell to Princess Anne and Prince William, both recognized as senior counselors of state under royal law. The palace communications director issued a short statement at 10:50 p.m., reading, "Her Majesty the Queen is attending to private family matters." It was a phrase few believed and fewer understood. Outside, journalists began connecting dots. Was Camilla's silence linked to Anne's secret journey? Was the royal family dividing into factions once again? On social media, hashtags like hashtag "Where is Camilla?" and hashtag "Midnight" at Windsor began trending within hours. The air around Buckingham Palace thickened with suspicion. By midnight, the Queen Consort's absence had evolved from curiosity into alarm. While reporters chased sightings of the Queen, something far more serious was unfolding behind closed doors. Inside Windsor Castle, Princess Anne and Prince William met privately with trusted aides. The monarchy's machinery, temporarily leaderless, was being reassembled piece by piece. A question no one dared to ask in public was already being answered in secret. If not Charles and not Camilla, then who holds the crown's spirit tonight? The power vacuum. No one admitted. King Charles's hospitalization left Britain in uncharted waters. Technically, the king still reigned, but in practice, no one was steering the crown. For the first time since George VI's final illness in 1952, royal governance was adrift. State briefings were delayed, prime ministerial updates postponed, and even the Daily Court Circular halted publication for 48 hours. Inside Whitehall, ministers grew nervous. The monarch's voice had vanished, and no clear command had replaced it. At Buckingham Palace, chaos disguised itself as protocol. Press statements required triple approval from Anne's office, William's staff, and the Lord Chamberlain's secretariat. Such redundancy, insiders explained, was a telltale sign of panic control. The risk was simple. One wrong headline, and markets could falter. Commonwealth allies could waver, or foreign governments could interpret silence as instability. This was not just a family emergency, it was a constitutional vacuum wrapped in secrecy. Behind the polished facades, two people began working quietly to contain the damage: Princess Anne and Prince William. Their first private meeting at Gatcombe Park lasted over 2 hours, ending just after 1 a.m. The discussion, according to insiders, revolved around safeguarding the spirit and legitimacy of the crown, should the king remain incapacitated. For Anne, the matter was moral. For William, it was generational. And for both, the solution had to be fast, before rumors spiraled beyond control. That night, a single idea emerged. A symbolic act of protection, not recognized by law, but sanctified by tradition. It was Anne's proposal, delivered with the same firmness that once made her the Queen's most trusted daughter. If the public must see stability, then they shall see it. We do not need a crown to protect the crown from that moment. A plan began to form, one that would culminate at Windsor before dawn. And so, as the country slept unaware, Princess Anne prepared to do the unthinkable. Her loyalty to her brother was absolute, but her devotion to the monarchy was greater still. Somewhere between duty and destiny, a decision took shape. The crown must remain visible, even if unseen. The next hours would test her courage, Catherine's faith, and the boundaries of royal law itself. Anne's dilemma: duty over blood. For Princess Anne, the events of October 3, 2025, were unlike any she had faced in her 73 years. Born into duty, she had always believed that loyalty to the crown came before loyalty to individuals, even her own family. She had seen it with her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had sacrificed her personal happiness for stability. Now, standing at the edge of a similar storm, Anne understood that history was calling her to act with that same discipline. And this time, it was not about rule. It was about survival. By 4 p.m., messages from Buckingham Palace confirmed that King Charles's condition remained critical but stable. Yet, to Anne, the words meant little. She had seen enough illness, enough silence. The monarchy could not afford uncertainty. Not again. Camilla's unexplained disappearance and the public's growing anxiety made one thing clear: the monarchy was losing control of its own story. She confided in her closest advisor, Major Richard Havers, "This is not about inheritance. It's about preservation. If we falter now, everything Mother built could crumble." As darkness fell over Gloucestershire, Anne phoned Prince William at Admer Hall. The call lasted precisely 23 minutes, every word measured and deliberate. She spoke of Catherine's strength, her composure, and her bond with the people. "She is the face of continuity," Anne said. "If the world must see calm, let them see it through her." William, torn between son and successor, hesitated. But in the end, his trust in Anne outweighed his doubt. Her next move would not be public. It would be sacred. That night, as the clock neared 10 p.m., Anne opened an old chest inside her private study at Gatcombe Park. Among its contents lay an object untouched for decades: a small velvet box sealed in 1953, containing Queen Elizabeth's private coronation circlet. The item had been entrusted to Anne after her mother's passing, with one instruction: if the crown ever loses its anchor, give it to the one who can hold it. Now, after years of silence, that moment had arrived. With the decision made, Princess Anne called for a discreet convoy to Windsor Castle. No public announcements, no titles, no ceremony, only trust. What would unfold that night was not sanctioned by law, but by legacy. As midnight approached, the walls of Windsor prepared to witness a moment that would never appear in royal archives, yet would change the monarchy forever. The Midnight Gathering at Windsor. At exactly 11:45 p.m., 3 black Range Rovers slipped through Windsor's south gate. No headlights, no guards posted at the main entrance. The order had come from Anne herself. Total discretion. Inside the lead vehicle sat Princess Anne, Prince William, and Catherine. The second carried the Archbishop's aide, Reverend Thomas Huxley, and 2 palace guards. The third trailed behind, carrying the relic, Queen Elizabeth's golden reliquary, last used for her private blessings in 1981. The castle was silent, except for the sound of rain against stone. They gathered inside St. George's small chapel, not the grand hall used for royal funerals, but a private chamber reserved for sacred vows. Only 6 witnesses were present: Candles replaced the electric lights, their flames flickering across the centuries-old carvings. A faint scent of frankincense lingered, as if the spirit of history itself hovered there. Catherine entered quietly, her ivory gown shimmering in the candlelight. No crown, no jewels, only simplicity and reverence. Anne, standing near the altar, carried the velvet box close to her heart. As the group formed a half-circle, Anne spoke the first words, calm but resolute. In faith, in duty, and in truth, the crown must always stand. She then opened the box, revealing the 1953 circlet of Queen Elizabeth II. Even the air seemed to pause. William bowed his head, emotion crossing his face. Reverend Huxley recited a short passage from Psalm 72, one once read at Queen Elizabeth's own rehearsal nearly 72 years ago. In that instant, it was as if the past had returned to guide the present. Anne raised the circlet and placed it gently upon Catherine's head. Her words were barely a whisper, yet they carried the weight of the monarchy's centuries-old promise. By honor, by grace, by service, you shall uphold the crown until its return. There were no trumpets, no proclamation, no flash of cameras, only a quiet acknowledgement that the crown's spirit had found its next guardian. In that candlelit silence, Britain's future was symbolically secured, not by power, but by faith. By the time the clock struck 12:30 a.m., the ceremony was over. The witnesses dispersed into the night, sworn to silence. Officially, nothing had happened. Yet everyone there understood what had truly occurred. The monarchy had been given a heartbeat again. What followed, however, would reveal that secrecy has a price. Before dawn, whispers were already leaving Windsor's gates. The private coronation moment. Within hours, the chapel at Windsor Castle was empty once more. Yet something intangible lingered in its air. The candles had burned down to stubs. On the altar remained a single lily, placed by Catherine herself before departing. She would later describe that act as her offering to the crown. Around 1 a.m., Princess Anne ordered all logs of the night's activities sealed. The official entry listed, "Private prayer vigil for the king, attended by senior royals." But those who were present knew the truth. The circlet used that night was no ordinary artifact. It was a personal symbol of continuity, one Queen Elizabeth II had used during the earliest rehearsals of 1953, long before her coronation at Westminster Abbey. It represented not monarchy by bloodline, but monarchy by devotion. In giving it to Catherine, Anne had effectively recognized her as the moral heir, the one who would carry the institution's soul through uncertainty. As dawn approached, Anne's expression was calm. "The line is unbroken," she told William softly. "That's all that matters." When they returned to Buckingham Palace by 3:15 a.m., no announcement followed. William and Catherine retired to their private quarters at Admer Hall, while Anne returned to Gatcombe Park before sunrise. By mid-morning, aides began drafting the public narrative. A family vigil of unity and prayer. The Daily Mail received an anonymous tip about midnight lights at Windsor, but editors hesitated, unsure of its credibility. For the next 48 hours, silence became the palace's only shield. But silence rarely lasts in Windsor. Within days, whispers reached journalists. Anne and Catherine in formal attire, a golden box, a secret ritual. The palace dismissed the stories as fiction, yet those who understood royal language recognized a deliberate non-denial. Inside the monarchy, the phrase "private vigil" would soon become shorthand for one thing: a midnight oath. As Britain awoke to headlines about royal mystery at Windsor, one question began to dominate conversation. Where was Queen Camilla? The woman once at the center of power had vanished completely. And while Anne and Catherine remained silent, their unity had already begun reshaping public perception. The world would soon learn that the greatest battle for the crown wasn't fought with armies or politics, but in whispers, loyalty, and the courage to act in darkness. The aftermath of the secret ceremony. By dawn on October 3, 2025, Windsor's stone corridors were empty once more. Yet those who had been there, Anne, William, Catherine, and the two witnesses, knew history had shifted under their feet. The official schedule filed that morning simply read, "Private prayer vigil for His Majesty the King." But the candles still flickered faintly in St. George's Chapel, and a faint trace of incense hung in the air, as if the crown itself had exhaled. By 7:30 a.m., the first whispers reached the newsroom of the Times. A palace staffer, speaking off record, described unusual activity at Windsor past midnight. The report was cautious. No direct claims, no names, but enough to rattle the institution. At Buckingham Palace, Sir Clive Alderton called an emergency briefing. His only instruction: no comment, no confirmation, no denial. Silence, for now, was safer than contradiction. Still, the story began to travel on its own. At 9 a.m., Sky News ran a headline: "Senior royals seen leaving Windsor at 1 a.m." By midday, BBC Radio 4 hinted at a private constitutional ritual. And by evening, the Daily Mail printed the words that would ignite the world. Princess Anne and the Princess of Wales conduct symbolic ceremony at Windsor Chapel. The article cited anonymous palace aides and described a golden box placed on the altar. Inside the palace, Queen Camilla's representatives remained silent. They neither denied nor acknowledged the story. For the media, that silence was confirmation. For insiders, it was chaos. Camilla's office was dead quiet. One staffer later admitted, phones off, curtains drawn. It was as if they knew something had changed, and not in their favor. As daylight faded over London, a strange calm fell across the palace. Anne refused interviews, William cancelled appearances, and Catherine retreated to Admer Hall. Meanwhile, Camilla's absence deepened from mystery to concern. The monarchy had survived wars and scandals, but never a night like this. What began as secrecy now teetered on the edge of exposure, and the truth was about to spill into the world. Camilla's absence turns to alarm. 2 days later, on October 5, 2025, the Royal Communications Office quietly updated the public calendar. All of Queen Camilla's engagements for the rest of the month were marked postponed indefinitely. The explanation, Her Majesty remains by the King's side, was quickly contradicted by hospital sources who confirmed she hadn't visited the London clinic since September 30th. For journalists, that single inconsistency was enough to turn suspicion into alarm. By 10 a.m., reporters gathered outside Clarence House, hoping for any sign of movement. Hours passed, but no vehicle emerged. The only clue came from a florist who claimed palace security had ordered the removal of Camilla's personal monogram from the main entrance gate, a subtle but unmistakable signal. For royal watchers, it was the sign of isolation, perhaps even exile. The Telegraph ran the question that defined the moment. Where is the Queen? Behind closed doors, however, a different conversation was unfolding. Senior aides debated whether Camilla's absence was self-imposed or instructed by Princess Anne and Prince William. Some believed she had been asked to step back for stability. Others whispered of confrontation over King Charles's constitutional papers. One source claimed she had tried to access sealed documents held under Operation Continuum, the same files authorizing succession planning. Whatever the truth, her silence left a vacuum that Catherine now quietly filled. Public sentiment shifted almost overnight. Hashtags like #Queen of Hearts and #StandWithCatherine surged online. The people who once doubted monarchy were now defending it, but through Catherine, not Camilla. She became the emotional center, noted historian Margaret Tyndall. While Camilla vanished, Catherine and Anne stood visible, calm and dignified. In crisis, perception is power, and they owned it. With Camilla gone and the monarchy's image now tied to Catherine, speculation became unstoppable. When the first blurred photo from Windsor appeared, a pale gown under candlelight, it confirmed what whispers could not. The question was no longer if the secret ceremony had happened, but why. And as the truth surfaced, Britain's faith in the crown was about to be tested in ways unseen since the days of Diana. The nation reacts to the revelation. The photo appeared on October 6, 2025, at exactly 6:42 a.m., uploaded by an anonymous account called Windsor Witness. It showed a faint outline of Catherine inside St. George's Chapel, dressed in ivory, her head bowed beneath a soft halo of light. Within an hour, it went viral. BBC Breakfast interrupted its broadcast. "Has Britain witnessed a secret coronation?" the host asked, disbelief in her voice. By midday, nearly 20 million views had been recorded on X and YouTube. Reactions split the country in two. Traditionalists called it unconstitutional theater, while the public saw it as an act of devotion. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, holding banners that read, "Anne defends the crown," and "Catherine, our true queen." International outlets joined in. CNN described it as a secret oath to stability, while Le Monde called it a British fairy tale turned political earthquake. What began as rumor had now become a movement. Inside the palace, aides scrambled to draft an official response. After 36 hours of deliberation, Buckingham Palace released a carefully worded statement. The Princess of Wales led a private constitutional prayer at Windsor, accompanied by Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal. No further details. No mention of crowns, circlets, or ceremonies. The statement neither confirmed nor denied what the world already believed. The ambiguity was deliberate, a shield forged from silence. For many, the statement sealed the truth. It was an admission cloaked as denial, wrote royal analyst Peter Townsend Jr. They confirmed nothing, but surrendered everything. Public approval for Catherine soared to 92% in polls. Even critics began calling her the Queen in spirit. Meanwhile, Camilla's continued silence became the final confession, one spoken without words. In just 1 week, the crown had transformed from question to conviction. The world had seen Catherine not as a bystander, but as destiny. And as the truth settled over Britain, one final act remained: the reckoning of history itself. What began as whispers in a candlelit chapel would end as legend: the Midnight Oath. The legacy of a midnight crown. Months later, historians would refer to it simply as the Midnight Oath. The secret ceremony of October 3, 2025, became one of the most debated royal events since Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. Yet, unlike scandal, It carried no shame, only symbolism. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about preservation. For Princess Anne, it fulfilled the promise she once made to her mother. If the day comes when duty trembles, ensure the right hands carry the crown. For Catherine, the moment changed everything. Though no title officially shifted, her moral authority soared. Every public appearance, from hospital visits to charity openings, drew record crowds. People didn't just see a princess, they saw a protector. It was as if the crown itself had chosen her, one royal correspondent said. And in every photograph since, the faint glimmer of that unseen circlet seemed to linger around her presence. As for Queen Camilla, history grew silent. She remained largely unseen, retreating to Ray Mill House in Wiltshire and appearing only for private family gatherings. Official records now refer to her as Her Majesty Queen Consort, in permanent withdrawal. It was neither exile nor punishment, simply consequence. King Charles, still recovering, offered no public comment, though one insider recalled his quiet words. Anne was right. The monarchy must never drift. And thus, the Midnight Crown became legend, a quiet, unrecorded coronation of spirit over title. For Britain, it marked the rebirth of trust. For Anne, it was redemption. And for Catherine, it was destiny. In that chapel, without witnesses or fanfare, she had accepted a burden older than any law, to keep the crown alive when no one else could. And from that night forward, every generation would remember the truth. The crown's greatest strength has never been its jewels, but the hearts that carry it in silence. By sunrise, the whispers had become legend, the midnight oath. Some called it rebellion, others called it redemption. But for Britain, it was a reminder that true power isn't always taken in daylight. Princess Anne had protected the legacy, and Catherine had accepted the burden, not for glory, but for duty. And as Camilla faded quietly into the shadows, the nation looked to the woman crowned in silence and saw its future. No trumpets, no thrones, only faith, family, and the courage to defend the crown when no one else would. History will never forget that night.